if I can finish this challenge. Like, stay tuned. This is so not a new vlog, boy.
No.
This vlog has been going on for 3 weeks. As you can see, I am still alive. I feel quite proud of myself. I am organizing a little 24-hour readathon. The 22nd of September, and I am dressed for the occasion. Well, hello and welcome to this massive reading vlog. It is the 30th of September today, and before we go back in time and see how this challenge went, let me explain why. Because we have now reached the end. I decided that I wanted to have a little bit of a project for myself for September, so I decided why not do the 30 books in 30 day challenge. This challenge just means that you're going to read 30 books in 30 days, and I chose the 30 days of September. It's not necessarily the goal that you read one book every single day, because I did make a TBR and some books were quite a bit bigger than others. So my intention was to take a few days for the big books and read multiple short books in one day. Still, massive challenge. As you can see, I am still alive on the 30th of September. So without further ado, let's get back to the 1st of September. I started the month with a memoir that everyone seems to be reading. This is a 6-hour audiobook from former child actor Jeanette McCurdy. She talks about her experience as an actor and mainly how her mother forced her into it. I've never watched anything from the Disney Channel, so I had no previous interest in Jeanette McCurdy, but all the great reviews drew me to the book. And what can I say? The hype is justified. The build-up of the book feels very skilled. In short chapters, McCurdy gives us pieces of her life that make us understand how a mother can be so harmful without her having realized it until her mother died. Hence the title, I'm Glad My Mom Died. I gave this a 4.5 out of 5 stars. It is day 2. I have finished my second book. I did already start this in August, but I finished it for day 2. This is called A Secret Sisterhood, and it discusses the friendship of Jane Austen, Charlotte Bronte, George Eliot and Virginia Woolf. This book explores a friendship that we don't really know about, or that biographers haven't really shown a big light on. This is a book about authors that I really love and know quite a bit about. So especially the Jane Austen and the Bronte chapter, even though it has a lot of interesting information, I kind of knew most of the things they were telling. So my favorite was definitely the friendship between George Eliot and Harriet Beecher Stowe, because I know very little about both those authors and there was a lot of new information for me. I think this book is most enjoyable if you don't know that much about these authors yet, but it is well written, well researched. Even though of course there's a bit of speculation in this book, I felt like it was done right and done well. This is a great non-fiction and a 4-star. I read The Chime Seekers by Ross Montgomery. This Halloween middle grade was everything I wanted it to be. It has great character development, a slow plot, a magical portal and different magical creatures. I do regret not saving it for Halloween because it's set during Halloween, but I only discovered that it was set during Halloween whilst reading. I gave this 5 out of 5 stars. The Deep by Rivers Solomon is a short fantasy novel that explores the history of pregnant women that were thrown off slave ships. In this Afro-futuristic novel, these children from these women were raised in the sea. We follow their descendants centuries later. To deal with their horrific history, one person is called the historian, and the person who has to carry the memory of their history. but the current historian is not up for the task anymore. This book has a great plot and amazing theme and atmosphere. It has a sapphic Little Mermaid storyline, which I really enjoyed, but the novel itself has some weaker points. It's a bit hard to follow, and it seems to miss some vital interactions between characters. Overall, I would recommend giving this a go if it sounds interesting to you. I read The Wizard of Oz by Frank L. Baum, which of course I love the 1930s film, but it was time to also read the book. The book is very similar to that film. It has that old Alice in Wonderland wit that the film misses a bit. I really enjoyed that, even though the 1980s illustrations in my edition seem scary. It's funny and witty and has that lovely bit of 1900s sexism and imperialism. But overall, I liked it more than I thought I would, and I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. Hi, it is the 7th of September, meaning we are 1 week in right now, and it's going good so far. I've read 6 books and I am in the middle of Possession, but that is a big book. It's I think 500 pages or even 600. So instead of reading a whole book today, I decided to focus a little bit on Possession. I have planned a little 24-hour thing in which I hope to read like at least 4 books in the 24 hours, so that I can compensate for some days I'm using to read Possession, because that is not a one-day read, believe me. But I need to talk to you about a 5-star read. This is Elena Knows by Claudia Pinheiro, which is translated by Francis Riddle from the Spanish to the English. This is a book from Argentina. It has only been translated in 2021, but it's a book from 2007. So it's a bit of an older book. I used it for the prompt after 2022, so looking back, I'm not sure it counts, but I'm very glad that I read this. At the beginning of this novel, we meet Elena, who is in her 60s. She has been diagnosed with Parkinson's, and she finds out that her daughter has been found dead. The authorities classify it as suicide, but Elena does not believe this, and she has her reasons to not believe this. We follow her through a day as she tries to find out what happened. A major theme in this book that was really interesting to me is ownership of your body. Of course, with Elena and her Parkinson's, but also ownership of female bodies, of pregnancies and abortions. A big example of this is that Elena measures time in her medication. Every few hours she has to take her medication to keep control, or as much control as she can have over her body. Just after taking the medication she functions best, and it slowly becomes less and less. So as we follow her through the day, we also follow her through her calculating what activities she can and cannot do based on how long it's been since she has taken her medication, or since she's been allowed to take her medication. Of course, I was able to connect with that, also having to do those kind of calculations on a daily basis. So I really like that that was part of the book. It's really there through language as well, of course, because time is measured in medication, but there are a lot of metaphors as well that is really used in repetition of certain words, especially the title Elena Knows. But does she? That is the question within this book, and it's constantly said that Elena knows this, Elena knows that, and I found that really well done. It's repeated with more words, but I really enjoyed it. Also, the plot is great, really fast paced. I think it would be a bit of a struggle to read this in a day, but it definitely was not, because I didn't think I would be able to have a full literary fiction novel read in a day, but it was really easy. Would highly recommend this for a readathon as well. It was time for another non-fiction, so I picked Botanical Folk Tales from Britain and Ireland. This is a collection of stories that relate to different flowers and plants. It was adorable, weird and wholesome, everything you could want from myth. I would also really recommend the audiobook because it is narrated so well with so much feeling. This was a solid 4-star for me. I finished Possession. What to say? about Possession. So Possession is an academic-based fiction novel, I would say. It gave me a little bit of dark academia vibes. It is about a group of academics who find a bundle of letters between two poets and they try to find out what happened between those two poets. Throughout the novel we get part of those letters, we get pieces of poetry, we get different timelines of those poets' lives and of the life of the academics. This book is 600 pages and it really didn't need to be that big. I gave this book 3 stars, mainly because I felt that the academics just discussing general academics that didn't really feel connected to the mystery they were trying to solve was such a big part of the book to me that I got bored a lot of times. Same with the poetry. There was a lot of poetry in this book that I didn't feel needed to be in there. I think someone in the Discord, because this was our Hobbitses book club read, described this book as incredibly highbrow. And I think I agree with that. There was so much in this book that were just proving how clever academics are. To me, it didn't feel important. Nothing in the book to me felt important. There is a really emotional, beautiful plot in this book, but to me that could have been a plot of 200 pages. And the rest of this book I didn't necessarily care a lot about. I think just academics researching poetry and poets, I think it's beautiful. I don't feel the incredible importance of what they're doing enough to have enjoyed this book a lot. I can see that other people would enjoy this book, but to me overall it just felt like the book was floating in the air and it just did not land where it was supposed to land, and the plot that I cared about was way too small a part of the book, and discussing academics was much too big for me personally. Having said that, I do think this book is an achievement because it did feel very unique. It did feel like a skilled piece of work. I just did not enjoy reading it. Simple as that. Let's give like a mid update because it's the 12th of September, so we're almost halfway through the month. Of course, because I read a 600-page book, I am a little behind, and with behind I mean that I have not finished the book every single day. Seeing that I finished my biggest book of the month, that's kind of okay. And I started yesterday my other big book of the month, which is still live. So that's okay. I am organizing a little 24-hour readathon on the 17th and 18th of this month, hoping to fit in most of my short reads in that 24 hours so I can catch up on days. So far I'm hopeful. So far I think I can do it, especially because I have so many of my shorter reads still on my TBR to read. Last month I read The Bone Season by Samantha Shannon, and my edition also had the prequel novella. Since it was short I decided to pick it up. It was fine and exactly what I expected it to be, but it didn't have any of the tension that the novel had, so I rated it a bit lower, a 3-star, but it didn't really get me out of wanting to read more of this series, so it was a fun read, nothing special. I have finished my other book club read. I have finished Still Life as Sarah Women. I enjoyed this. This was a 4-star for me. It was a bit of a different book than I thought it would be, because now I think that maybe in TBR videos I have described this wrong, because I thought this was a Second World War novel. It is not. We meet Ulysses Temper, who is in his 20s when he is sent during the Second World War to Italy as a soldier, and then we meet Evelyn, who is an art historian who is also going to Italy to restore art. They meet and they have an interesting conversation, and the rest of the book is us following them throughout the coming decades. This book has beautiful themes of found family, which I just really love. There are beautiful queer storylines in this book as well. And one of my favorite things, of course, was the E.M. Forster storyline. I'm a fan of E.M. Forster, and his novel A Room with a View is, I think, just heavily inspired this book. But it's also mentioned a lot, and E.M. Forster as a person is also mentioned a lot. I especially enjoyed how parts of this novel really felt like A Room with a View. And if you've read A Room with a View, one of the wonderful things in that book is the Italian setting and the atmosphere atmosphere, and I could really find that in this book as well. A big part of this book is set in Italy, which had just the perfect atmosphere. I am not necessarily someone who is like found family, that is my trope, but I loved it in this book. And my favorite character was... I listened to the audiobook for most of this, which I would recommend because it's a bit of a slow book, and the audiobook really usually helps me with slow books because then I can just do other things. I think I did a lot of embroidery again during reading this. Why do I not remember his name? Maybe my favorite character was Claude the parrot, because there is a talking and very wise parrot in this book, and I really enjoyed him. But he has a very strong relationship with a man, Cress, I think is his name, and I really liked him. And I thought the audiobook narrator, who is the author herself, gave him just a very funny and witty voice. For me it wasn't a 5-star, I think, because of the slowness, and the writing wasn't really my thing. I didn't love that about the book, but again the audiobook kind of helped me get over that. But a solid 4-star nevertheless. It is now the 15th and I have read 11 books, so I'm a little bit behind, but since I have read this and Possession, I am not too worried, because those were the 2 books that I was worried about. Right now I'm going to get hopefully my first pumpkin spice latte from Starbucks, and then the reading continues. At this point in the challenge, I was starting to feel a bit burned out, so I decided to binge watch a TV show, and I ended up with His Dark Materials, which I don't know why, but I had never watched before. I absolutely loved it, and then I remembered I still had a book called Lyra's Oxford. This is a prequel to the series by Philip Pullman, that I never read by the way, on which the show is based. This was fine and plenty adventurous, but I think it's definitely written for the readers of the book series. Good morning! We have this morning a Bella for moral support. Hi Bella! As we endeavor to start our 24-hour readathon. It is, I think, a half hour before the sprint starts, so that should be really fun today. I'm very distracted by this little girl. So I am behind on reads. I truly am. I did finish Beat Read, which I really enjoyed. Honestly, Beat Read I gave 4 stars. It was really fun. I'm becoming a bigger and bigger Emily Henry fan. But somehow I was in the mood to read my big novels, my big books, which the mood I am very often in. But that does mean that I have only like really my short reads still on my TBR. Okay, so I have 4 short books I would like to read, or like 5, because I did do a few roles for the 24-hour readathon, and host privilege, I already know what the roles are. So I picked some books from my TBR or short books that I had on my trolley that fit that prompt, and you're sitting on them right now. So now you're a bit lower, I apologize. So the books I'm going to attempt to read today are the poetry collection by Amanda Lovelace, which is The Princess Says Herself in this one. The only book that was actually on my TBR is Snow and Rose, which just such an autumnal wintry book. I'm really looking forward to this. And also Galathea by Madeline Miller. This I think I could possibly even read in one sprint, but I'm just really looking forward to looking at all the beautiful illustrations. So I have these 3, and I also have an audiobook called Sweet Bean Based, which fits another prompt. So I think I could finish all of these in the 24 hours. This readathon starts at 12, which is in half an hour, until 12, like in the afternoon tomorrow. And I'm of course going to sleep. So slightly nervous to host sprints by myself, but I'm in a reading mood, so I'm just going to focus on that. And I will talk to you, I think, just tomorrow morning when I finish, hopefully, all of these. It is Sunday afternoon, and ooh, you can hear it in my voice. I love a 24-hour readathon, and this one was so cozy. I had such a good time. We had sprints for 6.5 hours, which is the longest we've ever done, and it was awesome. But I always feel shattered after a 24-hour readathon, even though I had like a full night of sleep. The amount of reading is both really relaxing and it turns your brain into mush. But I did finish the 4 books for the 4 prompts, only one of which was on my set TBR. We have a little cat tail over here. So the first prompt was just a contemporary, and wow, Bella. For that one I read a poetry collection called The Princess Saves Herself in This One by Amanda Lovelace. I didn't have the heights of expectations for this one because I don't often dwell very well with contemporary poetry, but I really loved this one. It was a punch in the gut. Maybe not the best way to start reading sprints because I was already an emotional mess after finishing this in the first sprint, but it was really good. I really enjoyed it. It's like it's a solid 4-star. Very short, as you can see, and I really like this one because it's also for me. My boy, he is even better than books. Fiction has nothing on you. So, shout out to my husband. The second prompt was a contemporary with a protagonist over 40 or a previous TBR fail. I decided to go for an audiobook on script. This one is called Sweet Bean Based, and it was translated from the Japanese. This was really cute. We follow a man who works in a confectionery store. Oh gosh, he makes and sells food, and then one day an elderly woman asks him to work there, and she is really skilled at making sweet bean paste, which is what he sells. He sells sweet bean paste in pancakes. They both have a hard past and they discover more about each other. They develop a friendship. It's really beautiful, and it's really beautiful detailed about food as well. It was that typical Japanese fiction that I usually really enjoy, and I really like this one as well. I do want to give a content warning for ableism. It is part of the book. Like, ableism is discussed. I can see how it would be triggering to read for some people. That was also a 4-star. And then we had a historical fiction with either a new to author or backlist from favorite author. And I chose to read Calathea by Madeline Miller, which I really liked Madeline Miller's novels. And this is a short story she published before her novels. This is really fun. I really like it. It's a 4-star again. Quite a lot of 4-star reads for this readathon. This has beautiful illustrations. This is a Dutch translation, so unfortunately not available for everyone. But this is about this myth that I think in the afterword she says that Ovid wrote it first, but it's about a myth where a man falls in love with a statue that he creates, and then he wishes the statue to come to life. And this story is like a feminist retelling of the point of view of the statue. It felt very unique, as a lot of Madeline Miller's writing does. So this was like not mind-blowing, but I really enjoyed it. And I think the book that I had the highest expectations for, but that I didn't really enjoy, this was what I was reading throughout the reading experience. This was for the prompt historical fiction, was Snow and Rose. This is a middle grade about 2 sisters who live in a cabin in the woods together with their mother, and their father has gone missing at the beginning of the novel. I really liked the story, I liked the illustrations, I liked the atmosphere. I just didn't really enjoy the writing. You know, it's that kind of writing that feels very distant, that you cannot really connect with, and therefore I constantly kind of lost my concentration and I wasn't really sure what was going on. I couldn't follow the story very well. These illustrations are so beautiful and the cabin and everything is so cute, and I also really liked the story in itself. I think maybe for me this would have worked better in a graphic novel. I think where the illustrations have a bigger job of telling the story than the text, because I didn't really enjoy the writing. 3 books and Sweet Bean Paste, which I think I am now at 16 out of 30. So we have reached the halfway point, or 16 or 17, I'm not sure. But we have at least reached the halfway point. It is already the 18th of September, so I'm still a little bit behind, even though I read for 24 hours, or like, kind of. I don't know if I can finish this challenge, like, stay tuned. The Prime of Miss Jean Brodie is a short witty novel about a teacher in Edinburgh. She creates a tight-knit group of girls that is called the Brodie Bunch, or the Brodie Girls. Why do I not remember? Jean Brodie is confident and independent, but she gets everything completely wrong, which makes for a funny and absurd read. It was very clever, very layered, and I really love to read more from Muriel Spark. I had anticipated Amari and the Great Game for a while, and it was finally released on Script. This is the sequel to Amari and the Night Brothers. It's about a girl who finds out there's a Bureau for Supernatural Affairs. Think like Men in Black. I had the same feeling as I did for the first book, great characters, great atmosphere, but the plot missed some originality. It was cliché heavy, and a nod to other fantasy worlds was a bit too heavy. Nonetheless, I did really enjoy it, so it was a 3.5 star for me. At this point I was fully living for my audiobook binge, so I listened to a short non-fiction called I'd Rather Be Reading. This was very disappointing. It talked about all the things we discuss on BookTube, but it could have fitted in a YouTube short or an Instagram post. It had no depth and gave me no new information. Unfortunately, my first 2-star of the month. I decided to read some Booker nominees, and Small Things Like These was recommended by one of you in the comments, so thank you. It's incredibly beautiful. It's set in the 1980s in Ireland and follows a man who sells coal. It felt like Charles Dickens's Christmas Carol, but set in the social and political climate of 1980s Ireland. Would highly recommend this for December. It's the 22nd of September and I am dressed for the occasion. My little autumn boots, this new skirt which I'm really loving, and of course the autumn... Oh, I really need to clean this mirror. My autumn t-shirt that I embroidered myself. I am not super satisfied with how it turned out because this fabric is really stretchy. So it was a pain to embroider. The details are not as beautiful. Oh, cat. As I had planned them to be. I am finally on schedule again for the 30 and 30. We have reading sprints tonight and I'm definitely going to finish my book for today during those sprints. First, I thought I would go out and buy some autumn things I don't need, like a mug, a candle, maybe some socks. Autumn has been making me really happy these last 2 days. Something I just want to keep on tapping into. But as I live in the Netherlands, my choice of transportation is a bike and this is not going to work. Now I'm ready. Always 50% chance of rain. So yes. The haul was actually very disappointing. Usually when I go to this store, I spend more money than I want to. And now I just got a few things, which is a little bit sad. My best purchase is definitely these cute little candles. I think I will just put them on my shelves and not light them really. And then I have a caramel pear tea. These candles, that is literally all. That's so sad. I have finished reading Cranford by Elizabeth Gaskell and it was surprisingly good. Every time people talk about Elizabeth Gaskell and about her books, I always feel like they say that this is one of her lesser ones. So far, it's my favorite Elizabeth Gaskell. This really has that Jane Austen wit that I haven't really found in other Elizabeth Gaskell works, like in her Gothic short stories or North and South and Mary Barton. We follow a group of old spinsters who live in Cranford where basically only women live. It's so witty, it's so funny. While I was reading this, I had a constant smile on my face. It really reminded me kind of Jane Austen's Juvenilia in the way that characters are made fun of. This edition also has the best illustrations and there are a lot, so I cannot really show you my favorite, but I think this illustration shows pretty well how funny this book is. It also has a mystery which I really enjoyed as well. I really was invested in how that would resolve. I think this book would also be a great introduction in reading English literature from the Victorian era, from this period of time. Because it's so funny, it's quite easy to read and it's also not as big as other Victorian novels because this has 300 pages for 4.5 star. I really enjoyed it. I had such a great time. I was not planning to read The Dawn Tree by Kieran Millwood Hargrave, but somehow this book lived in my mind for days. It's much longer than I wanted to mood read for this challenge. It's over 300 pages. It's her newest novel and has quite a lot of similarities with her other works. Think layered female characters, pre-1700, queer romantic storylines, powerful men who are dogs, and slow, gentle writing. This was a 4 stars for me. It's not really a book for everyone, but it's definitely for me. My favorite middle grade series. This book is the 5th in the series and follows Milo and his magical train. There is something about the concept of magical trains that I just love with my entire being. I adored this book, every minute of it. Milo is one of the most endearing middle grade characters that I've ever met. A 5 stars.
Amateur Shakespeare Library present Othello by William Shakespeare.
I'm still a newbie when it comes to Shakespeare. I never expected myself to love his works. But here I am, once again, truly enjoying the drama, the wit, and the language of an absolute bonkers Shakespeare play. I enjoyed this plenty, but the other plays I've read still rank higher. Think Hamlet, Romeo and Juliet, and A Midsummer Night's Dream. I think Othello has one of those plots where you really want to read it in one sitting, which I read it in 2 sittings, but it's so exciting and I can just imagine how engaging it is to see live as an actual play, which I would like to do at some point. The Cat Who Saved Book is a contemporary fantasy about a teenage boy who inherits a bookshop. Sounds absolutely adorable, but the plot was a mess, the fantasy element was just there without any reason. It was incredibly pretentious when discussing books, and on top of that, very sexist. So I DNF'd it little over halfway through. Alas. I mean, I love a good, very old diary. This is a few highlights. Their blood and brains flying over the Duke's face. This is what I'm reading, by the way. It's our few diary entries from Samuel Bevis. Bevis? Something like that. Hey Nora.
Ben je nu aan het filmen?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Look who else we have. Everyone is chilling out here.
Hi guys, welcome to a new vlog.
Oh, this is so not a new vlog, boy.
Nee.
This vlog has been going on for 3 weeks. Because today, can you see me? No, you cannot. It is the 26th, meaning I have 5 days left of this challenge. And I think I'm actually going to do it. I think it's going to work, which is so exciting because right now I'm reading my 27th book. And I'm also reading 28th already. I've read 100 pages of that one. So I think I'm doing it. So today I have scheduled basically the entire day to read Mrs. Dalloway by Virginia Woolf. I am 60 pages in, I've read this morning. It's almost time for lunch. That is why Boy visited me in the office because he's having lunch. So I have a little over 100 pages of this still to read, which this is like heavy brain power. So that's why I've basically scheduled the whole day for this. But yesterday I finished The Great Fire of London, which are diary entries from 1666 and a year earlier, I think. And this is about a man who worked as a clerk, and it's so funny and interesting. I mainly really like the details. It's not very readable. I mean, they did, I think, translate it in a more modern language, but he is very clearly just noting down everything, and almost every diary entry ends with when to supper and to bed. I just love that kind of details. He describes the kind of clothes that his wife is wearing, that his mother is wearing, what his wife and mother are doing. And with The Great Fire of London, he described it very matter-of-factly, but he gave some amazing details that I think a historian would not give you. Like if someone was writing a document as a historian, they would not give you the kind of details that he was burying his Parmesan cheese in his garden in the hope that it would not catch fire, or that he was very impressed by all the women who were helping to fill the buckets with water, but that he was quite shocked at how drunk they got afterwards. Again, not super readable, so I gave it 4 stars, but I was pleasantly surprised by this one. So I am also enjoying Mrs. Dalloway, of course. It's a reread. I read it 3 years ago, and it was my first Virginia Woolf that I read, which I would still recommend if you want to start with Virginia Woolf, to start with Mrs. Dalloway. I had a few annotations, but of course right now it's much easier for me to follow, and it's easier for me to annotate as I go, so I've made a few tabs, a few annotations, and it's beautiful. It's absolutely beautiful. I'm noticing things that I didn't notice before, like stream of consciousness in this is so just beautiful. It's like the word I want to use. Things you can see, vision, the visual is what is like so far I think the leading thread throughout this stream of consciousness. So we can switch perspectives, but always throughout something that both people are seeing. So in the beginning we follow Mrs. Dalloway. She's upper middle class, I think, and she's throwing a party. Her husband is in Parliament. She decides to buy the flowers herself because her mates are already so busy. And then we have an event that that happens, and both Mrs. Dalloway and the character from who we follow a new perspective witness this event, and it is even enlarged when there is a airplane in the sky that Clarissa of course sees, and the other characters, well, they see it as well, but then a big group of people will see this airplane writing letters in the sky, and we follow very shortly a lot of perspectives of different people who don't really seem to matter for the story because Clarissa doesn't know them. They're not going to attend her party, which is like the main line of this novel. Most of them are working class people, but it's so interesting to just step in their head for a little bit, but it only can happen when they have a visual in common, which I'm really enjoying. There is a character who is a friend of Mrs. Dalloway's, and he's called Peter, and I know that he is part of the plot, but I find him as a character very uninteresting. I find him quite boring, and we've been following him for about 20 pages now, so I got a little bored and I thought I would film a video to, you know, not ruin my motivation. I have 2 books that were still on a set TBR that I do want to read. One is German Room, which I think it's now Monday. I think I will read this not tomorrow. I think tomorrow I'm going to go for an audiobook so that I can do some different things and just sit on the sofa and read. So this I will read later this week, and I've started the audiobook of King of Scars. I didn't know if I could finish that one because it's over 500 pages, but now that I'm 1 book ahead, like versus days, I think I can do it. I have the last 2 days of the month to read that book whilst I'm also listening to it while I'm doing chores and cooking, things like that, and before bed as well. So I am very hopeful I'm actually going to do this. So that is super exciting. I will talk to you about Mrs. Dalloway once I finished it. I'm sure I will have some new thoughts about it because it feels so promising already. I have finished Mrs. Dalloway. I finished it late last night, so I read it in a day, which is something I've wanted to do for a long time because the time span of this novel is 1 day, so I really wanted to read it in 1 day. So as you can see, I have tapped it with these orange tabs. So the first part is the morning, the afternoon, the evening, and then the start of the party is this. I really like that Virginia Woolf gives, I want to say timestamps because that's a word I use quite often, but she says often like it is a quarter before noon, and then she says it's noon. You really have a sense of time, and what I also like is that she really plays with how much time passes, because sometimes you have the 15 minutes between a quarter before noon and noon. It's about 30 pages, it's a lot. And then the party itself, which of course is many hours, is only the last little bit of the novel. This book really has a gut punch at the end. So even though there are quite slower parts in the middle of the book, because the ending really delivers in this novel, this cannot be anything but a 5-star. If you have tried to read it and if you have gotten stuck in the slowness of the middle, I would encourage you to keep going, because the ending and how the story comes together really is worth it. So yeah, of course I had a great time reading Virginia Woolf. I am so happy that I finally reread this, because that has been on my to want to do list for a long time, and I have finally done it. Also started editing this vlog, and it's hella intimidating to edit a vlog where you talk about so many books. So I think I will keep on doing that today, and then I will only have 3 more books to talk to you about. So I thought I could read another Booker nominee. Why not? I decided to go for this short novel called Treacle Walker. This short novel is about a boy who lives alone in a big house and meets different magical people. I think this is the kind of novel that is written for a certain group of people with similar upbringing and age as the author. It had many details of local and historical myth and stories that an average reader can't make sense of. I re-listened to some parts, but I just could not connect. I can see its value though, so I did give it 3 stars because I think other readers could really enjoy this book. I have just finished my 29th book, and that was King of Scars, which I enjoyed. Quality-wise, it doesn't live up to the previous duologies, so to Six of Crows and to Crooked Kingdom. It's a little bit in between those, and Shadow and Bone. I mean, I liked Shadow and Bone, but I could see like there was some earlier works. So yeah, I did enjoy it. I had a good time. I gave it 3.5 stars because I think quality-wise it's not as good as the previous 2 books. Nina is one of my favorite, if not my favorite character from the Prisha-verse. I love that she had an own storyline as well. I really loved her chapters, even though they did feel a bit... I don't know how realistic I found them. I'm aware that I'm talking about fantasy, but like the stakes were so high at some points that I felt the believability suffered a little bit, which is something I generally have with these books, that I don't always buy the believability of it, but I always have such a good time. I finished this much faster than I thought I would, so I still have tonight and tomorrow to read my last book, so it's happening. I'm doing this. I went to a really cute little store and I got some spooky earrings and the pumpkin. I think the pumpkin is my favorite. I also have a little bat and a little ghost, so I can switch in between them. I really love like the funkiness of having 2 different sides. I just really enjoy it. But yes, let's do it. Let's read that 30th book. Hi, I am back. Today is the 30th of September. It is 4 o'clock in the afternoon and I have just finished my very last book. Thank you. Thank you. I gave myself a 50-50 chance that I would do this and I did it. And honestly, I would do it again. I did not hate this challenge. I felt slightly overwhelmed at times, of course, but I was able to manage. And the weirdest thing about this challenge, which is something I did not see coming, is that I am now in the biggest reading mood ever. I thought October is going to be a slow month for me. I'm going to need to watch a lot of TV, get a lot of fresh air, be outside and not sit with a book on my lap for a long time. But I am in a bigger reading mood than I have been in maybe all year. Surprising ending, but I of course do need to talk to you about the last book I finished, The German Room by Carla Maliandi. This was translated by Frances Riddle from the Spanish. This is about an Argentinian woman who grew up in Germany in the first 5 years of her life, and then her family moved back to Argentina, and she now decides that she needs to go back to Germany to basically just escape her life. We follow her through a couple of months as she stays in this picturesque German town that she has always idealized in her head. I found this a very readable literary fiction, like 3.5 stars for how readable and at times plot driven this literary fiction book was. The ending was too poetic. It felt like it didn't fit the novel and it really dragged it down. So even though I think this is beautifully written, just being in a place where you don't know anyone felt painfully familiar at times, even though this main character, I was very annoyed with her at times. But that's okay, it's literary fiction. Liking the main character is like not the main point. But yeah, it was a solid literary fiction. And the 30th book I read in September. I know that I have probably overwhelmed you with talking about a lot of books. So let's have a little quick overview of the reading that has been done in this vlog. Okay, one of the things that makes me happiest is that I have found a few 5 stars, but also that I've really gotten back into middle grade because I just didn't prioritize it this year. And of course, when you're doing a reading challenge, it's really nice to have a lot of different genres. And like, if you want a tip and if you want to do this, then read a lot of different books. That is what kept it entertaining and exciting for me, because as you will see, for the TBR board I had 6 books. My favorite of those books, I think I actually kind of liked all of them, but my favorite has to be Mrs. Dalloway. On a shared number 2, I would say Cranford by Elizabeth Gaskell and Still Life by Sarah Winman. And then for the bookathon I rolled 2 doubles, so I had 8 books. My favorite being probably Elena Knows, which I gave 5 stars. Enjoyment wise, Beach Read and King of Scars I really enjoyed as well. Those weren't quite 5-star reads. I had a good time. They were a good palate cleanser for the other books that I had in this challenge. And of course most of these books were mood reads. So like I said, I had a great time with middle grade. I had 2 5 stars, both The Chime Seekers and Pages & Co were 5 stars. My literary fiction reading was not that successful. Most of them were like meh books for me, although The Dance Tree, like historical literary fiction, I really enjoyed that one, was a great surprise. And then I read some other books that were like non-fiction. I read one short story, one poetry collection and one play. I really quite liked Othello as well, which is the play that I read. But from that list, my favorite non-fiction was definitely Jeanette McCurdy's book, which was just so good. And the first book that I read for this challenge. So overall, I would say very successful. We only have one DNF and one 2-star. Now, I am not the toughest of raters, so those two books like I really didn't like. But there are a few 3 stars as well that I thought I had quite a good time with, but that I would not want to read again, would not necessarily recommend. But overall, I am super pleased that I have found a few new 5 stars. I feel quite proud of myself for doing this. And also for keeping it a very enjoyable experience. I am quite an organized person. I love myself a list. I love myself a planning. And without that, I don't think I could have done this. I would have gotten very intimidated by all the big books, which I didn't now. Overall, this was just a great positive experience. I would not say like I would recommend this because it really fitted my lifestyle to do a challenge like this. I think for a lot of people it wouldn't. Maybe next year in September I will do this again. It's definitely not one of those experiences where I feel like never again. It was challenging in the way I wanted it to be challenging. Before this vlog is over an hour long, which I'm pretty sure it already is, I'm going to log off now. Thank you so much for watching this. Let me know, would you try the challenge 30 books in 30 days? I would love to know if you will be willing to do this. For now, I hope that you have a lovely, lovely day or evening, and I hope to see you in another video. Doei!